All right, well, welcome to the podcast this week. Hopefully you're staying warm because we're not.
Man, it is freezing, dude. It's
Thank
so
the Lord
cold.
for heat. We'll just say that.
Grief.
I'm talking to Brandon McDonald, and their heat went out last night. Like, this is the worst time I feel like
No
for
way.
heat to go out. So he just texted me and said it's back on now.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
Now,
Terrible time for that
hopefully
to
they had gas fireplaces or some fireplaces that they could run some heat. But, man, goodness
Yeah, it'd be
gracious.
brutal. I guess now you just keep throwing on blankets. But, yep, it is a cold one. I didn't hear of anyone. Thankful that I didn't hear of anyone getting hurt yesterday. Sunday at church.
No. But you guys did a great job, man. I was telling John, we had several people comment how they really love seeing you and Will and John, like you guys out there throwing salt out, making sure people get across the roads. And I think people love seeing us serve outside of our normal environments. You know, like they expect us to be in those environments, but to see people outside of those environments, I think people really love to see that.
Yeah. Well, just the unexpected, like, we didn't expect it to snow and then it started sticking and just thinking of construction and having to walk around and that traffic flow. So.
Well, and one Sunday, you have a questionable, but you call it, but at least we had snow.
Yeah.
Yesterday, last Sunday, it was, we're good. And then you get there and it starts snowing.
Yeah.
And Julie came in and said, I just confused everybody at the end of the service. When I told people, like, I'm not going to tell you what to do.
At the end of 8:30.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, man, you all probably need to go home because you guys don't need to be walking across, slipping and sliding, all that kind of stuff. So I'm just telling you, so everybody's like, what do we do? What do we do? Do we go home? Do we stay? Do we go to Sunday school? I think I'm going to Sunday school. So you just can't give people an option.
Right.
Like, you just got to tell people what, because I get that, I guess, to a degree, but really all I was trying to do was help our senior adults understand, like, please go home and be safe,
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but it is kind of cool, though, how God's given us so much grace, man, over the last couple of weeks, because, like, this week, for example, was our first Sunday with limited bathrooms. We did get our bathroom trailers in, but the generator wasn't available, so they weren't open. But then we had limited attendance because of the weather,
Yep.
And so, like, we had a Sunday of limited attendance to kind of feel what's it going to be like with our entrances that are changed and things like that. So, we're getting all that stuff worked out today. So it's really kind of, I've just looked at it like, okay, the Lord's not going to let us bomb on this.
Yeah, for sure.
If we'd had 1,100 people here Sunday, and it could have been a different story,
Right.
So it was good. We still had a good attendance, but
yeah, for sure.
But thankfully we didn't have, and we do have limited entrances, and so it's interesting to watch transitions between services,
Yeah,
and things like that.
Yeah, it was funny. Even something as simple as, like, if you're on one side of the sanctuary trying to get to the other side, like, there's no back hallway anymore either. You have to come through.
No.
So seeing people, even like while we're rehearsing and stuff, come through. I'm like, I wonder why. Oh yeah, there's no,
Yeah, you're right. No, you're right. I see what you're saying. Yeah.
But yeah, and now I saw they're talking about potential snow this weekend too. So
Are they really?
Yeah. So we'll have to keep an eye on that and see what happens.
That's crazy. It's so crazy.
Yeah.
It's cold though, man. Good
It's very
night.
cold. Yeah.
Like, out there right now, it's like bitterly cold.
Yeah, it's rough.
I came in this morning. First thing I did was come down and go in and check on the builders, and man, those guys, they just wrap up. They just wrap up and go, man. They're out there tearing down the awning and all that kind of stuff, and they don't matter.
In front of the kids' building?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, dude. Yeah. So they've got the roofs coming off. Funny, we're going to talk about that.
Yeah.
And then they'll be tearing down the frame and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Wow.
All it's coming. Well, because they got to start building the pad.
Yeah.
And prepare for the steel to come in. So I don't know if you've noticed, if you did come up this way, they've got bulldozers and stuff over where the student building's going to be, and so they're beginning to tear that up to kind of build that concrete pad for the new student building. So basically, they'll build those pads and then get ready for the steel. They order the steel, and so they're just waiting on that.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I've been hearing them outside of my office window this morning.
Oh yeah,
tearing it
I
up.
guarantee it, man. They're getting after it.
Yeah, they're moving forward. It's cool stuff. Well, yeah, even this. I mean, we're just getting started in this series, but so far, man, Mark's a cool chapter to go through.
Mark's pretty good, man. I think it's what I enjoy is when you, again, just like I always say, when you look at an entire book and you start walking through it, there was a purpose in the way he wrote it. And there's a purpose in the way the Holy Spirit kind of laid things out. So when you have a chance to kind of go through it, it's almost like that comes off the pages, Yep. It's not like, and that's where, man, we just recognize the Holy Spirit's work in this is that it's not like I'm looking at it and I'm going, oh, okay, so I'm going to do this, this, and this,
Right.
You just kind of study through it, but you see it kind of coming up off the pages, and it's just a continuation, which is what's really cool, So I think that's just the benefit, man, of expository preaching.
Yeah.
You get the feel of here's why the Holy Spirit laid it out this way.
Yeah.
And then you walk through it and, people can preach these different stories in isolation. You like one of the stories I used this Sunday, tons of people preach that story in isolation. The story of the 4 guys and the paralytic and the roof. But when you see it in its context, that story's not really the main story. Mm-hmm. That's not the main thing. The main thing is what Jesus was doing and revealing, again, establishing his authority. Mm-hmm. So that was just a piece of the puzzle,
right?
Instead of the whole picture.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I love kind of pointing to that while we were talking in service planning, and then yesterday too. That first point though, if you can't use the door, use the roof.
Yeah, that's it, man.
Perfect.
And then the week before that, I'd heard that Brandon Lake song.
Oh yeah. Good timing.
Yeah, and so that's when I talked to you and I said, dude, if you guys know this or not, but it'd be it's a great song to do.
Yeah,
Sunday.
Yeah, Taylor's been asking me to do that one for a while, so she was very happy.
That worked out super well. Did a good job with it.
Yeah, it was great though. To kind of get into it a little bit, I was when we were reading through this passage, we talked about this some in service planning last week, but verse 9, when Jesus kind of responds to what's happening, he says to the people that were questioning him, which is easier, to say the paralytic, your sins are forgiven, or to say, rise up and take your bed and walk? Mm-hmm. But that you may know that I'm the Son of Man, has authority on earth to forgive. He said, the paralytic, rise up, take your bed and go home. So first, just to kind of get us going in this passage, like when they brought him in, they brought him through the roof, set him on the table. Like, why didn't Jesus just go ahead and heal him and then forgive his sins after the fact? Because last week we were talking some about Jesus' authority and establishing that. So kind of his trend has been establishing authority and then go and make disciples, like we were talking about last week. So with that, you'd think it'd be like, all right, you're healed now. Go and sin no more, get up and walk, whatever it may be. But this one, he kind of flipped it to the opposite. And a little bit looked like he wasn't even going to heal him at all. Just your sins forgiven. Yeah. Thanks for coming.
All right, dude. Drag him out of here. Yeah. Well, what's interesting is that, I was really glad at this, but the whole introductory concept of the message, how do you view Jesus? Yeah. It was really, to me, a lot of what he was doing in this, because we develop our view of Jesus based on how we met him. Mm. And so how we met him, I'm not going to read who this came from, but I'm going to read the text that I got yesterday, because it's really a very cool application of what I was trying to get at. Let's see. Okay. I got a text message that said, you'll see Jesus however you met Jesus, however you said it. That hit hard. Could be a sermon in itself. Mm. And I said, yeah, that was kind of the point I wanted to get across. And this is how this person responded. My Jesus was 90s Judgment House, fire and brimstone, God watching every move you make with the little John 3:16. Not so much 3:17 or fruits of the Spirit type Jesus. That's been hard to break the last 10 to 15 years.
Wow.
And I thought, like, that's it, man. Like, how you meet Jesus is how you will view Jesus. Mm. So if you met Jesus as, and I just used a couple of illustrations, as a moral policeman or a rule enforcer, that's how you're going to view Jesus. You're going to view Jesus as, that's the guy that's waiting for you to make a mistake. Yeah. That's the guy that's waiting for me to be a failure, and I'm going to feel the brunt of that.
Yeah.
And I asked this person a question. I said, how many people in our congregation do you think still feel that way? Mm-hmm. And their response was, all of them. And I thought, that's such a strong, powerful testimony that thinks like that's how they. I mean, we can read and talk about Jesus all we want to, but your interaction and your view of that person is going to be how you met that person. So like I met. I could pick a coach, that was really hard and rough on us. That's my view of that person.
Yeah.
Somebody else could say, "Oh man, that's the sweetest guy I've ever met in my life." I'm like, "No, he wasn't to us," But I think that's what people wrestle with, and so I think that's Jesus is establishing who he is. So what's interesting about that is, he would tell early in his ministry, like demons especially, like y'all need to keep your mouth shut. Don't tell people who I am. Why would he do that? Why would he tell somebody he healed early? Now keep this quiet, but go do what you're supposed to do in the temple. Because he wanted people to see who he was. He's revealing himself, and he's revealing and he's establishing his authority in his public ministry. And so you've got, like we talked about, the ones he did last Sunday. This story, what's interesting about this story, this is a story that's very popular, preached a ton, and it's preached in isolation. And there's nothing wrong with doing that, but you really kind of miss the gist of what's going on here.
Right.
Because this isn't about the healing, and this isn't about the friends. It's about Jesus establishing his authority to be able to forgive sin. Yeah. Notice what he says. He gives title, location, and function. He uses the title Son of Man for himself, not the Son of God. He says on earth, and I can forgive sin, so that you will know that the Son of Man can, and so what's interesting about that is their view of forgiveness of sin was all about what they did in the temple, and God did that in heaven. That's the only place that could happen. Well, now all of a sudden you've got somebody saying, I've got the authority to do that here on earth. Who has the authority to forgive sin? If only God can forgive sin. So Jesus is doing a lot of things there, right? He's not only healer, he's not only person who controls the spirit world. Man, he can forgive sin.
Yeah.
So either God has given him that authority or he's God. And I think that, that's what he's establishing. And he's establishing to these people, because he's got to be careful to not just be known as the healer. The one who can cast out demons. It's bigger than that.
Yeah. That's
so temporary. We in our flesh have a very temporary view of eternity. But I mean, how can we not?
Yeah.
We can't have a view of eternity thinking that, for example, this paralytic had his sins forgiven and he could have been drugged home and been perfectly fine. And we would all say, even the four guys probably would say, dude, like we busted the roof for that. We wanted you to get up and walk.
Yeah.
But Jesus knew that like this guy has got an eternity to be with God.
Yep.
So like, what's the problem?
New body with a brand new
100%. Yeah. Like this is so temporary, but we don't have a context of that. That's the one thing we have to understand in Scripture is that we have a limited context and a limited view. Like I believe in eternity and I know it's real. I know that new bodies, I know all those things are true and real, but my context of that is so limited because I've never seen it nor have I experienced it.
Yeah.
And so, we have context of things that our kids don't have because we've experienced it. We've lived it. I can tell you guys, hey, don't do this. Don't go down this road because I've been down those roads. I've lived those roads, But so we all have a limited context in that respect. Jesus is trying to broaden their perspective of who he is. Right? I have authority. I've come here to deal with your sin, not just your physical infirmities. Not that those things aren't important, but like in this story, sometimes it's what we think our greatest need is what gets us to Jesus to get him to reveal. Listen, there's no way these guys would have ever thought that this guy's greatest need was he needed his sins forgiven. Like there's no way those four guys would have had that mentality.
It's true.
And that's why I think in that first section, when I talked about a true friend, you just get him to Jesus. Like just get him, that's what a true friend does. I think we compartmentalize issues with our friends and we hear them talking and we go, well, that's not really spiritual. So let's go over here and talk about this, because Jesus doesn't, what does Jesus become the answer for? Spiritual problems, right?
Mm-hmm.
Instead of realizing, well, this is marriage or this is parenting or this is life, this is finances, this is whatever. And we don't realize he's the answer to all of that. Well, what do I need to go to Jesus? I'm already saved. Well, he's the answer to all of those things. Just get them to Jesus. Just get them to a place where they can understand. Man, I'll never, because here's how I think that works in life. I'll never view those areas of my life correctly until I view Jesus correctly. So when I view him correctly and understand his lordship in my life and all of those things and all that he's done for me and all that he has for me and all of that, none of these things get clear until I understand that. What most people do is they run to the Bible just like they would a Dave Ramsey book and look for financial principles to jump over here and attach to this part of my life. Well, if I just do this, this, and this, then my finances will be in order. Well, no, they won't, because you'll still be looking for something in your finances that Jesus said, I got for you. I'm going to provide. Until you understand me, you're not going to understand this part of your life correctly.
Yeah.
That make sense?
I think so.
Because our flesh will always look for these areas of our life to find satisfaction and happiness in.
Yeah.
Well, until we understand Jesus and our view of him and that he is our ultimate source of satisfaction, none of these other areas make sense. We'll just want to jump over here and grab principles and pull over and attach them to this instead of realizing, no, I need to go through him to those things. Right? So I can be a great money manager, but not have a Christocentric perspective of finances.
Yeah.
Because, am I going to take Jesus' principles of finances or Ron Blue's or Larry Burkett's or Dave Ramsey's? Well, whichever one I like better, whichever one fits my needs better. Well, what about just understanding the whole concept of Jesus' perspective of stewardship? Just his view of that. And what he, not just principles, because we've got to be careful, right? Bible's not a leadership book. But when it speaks of leadership, it's accurate, right? Or finance or any of those things. What about just looking at him and understanding him and who he is and what he says about me and what he wants to do for me and what he has done for me and how he wants me to view life. And then I turn around and start looking at all of these things kind of through him, and I go, oh, okay, so that really does not have anything to do with me being happy. That's just the way I got to survive in this world to accomplish what you want me to do. And you've already told me you got me, so I'm good. So it's and I guess it kind of deals with ownership, and because I think our flesh wants to be owners and not stewards. Like that's just reality.
That's true.
Right? Like I want to own. We were talking about this earlier. I want to own parenting. I want to own finances. I want to own my marriage. I want to own those things, but I don't mind you giving me some help. And you probably got the best help of anybody. So I'm going to say I believe that, which then makes me feel good about being a Christian, right?
Yeah, right.
And because I'm not going to listen to other people, I'm going to listen to you, but I'm going to still treat you like an expert. Instead of realizing, no, you own this, and I'm just a steward of these things. So I've got to look at this through you.
Yeah.
Because you are the owner. I'm not the owner.
Yeah. And that I said I think so, kind of devil's advocate-ly. I just made that.
Yeah, no, that's good.
Oh, is that a verb?
Well, it makes a podcast interesting. If we all agreed, man, it would be like, that's boring. I'm not watching that anymore.
But I think we say Jesus is the answer to everything, kind of the same school answer.
Yes.
But then you see these passages, and it's like, well, obviously Jesus cared about healing him, but his primary focus was his sins being forgiven. So like we say Jesus is the answer to all of it, but like it's easy for that to be said, but like, what does that practically look like for me?
Yeah.
What does it look like for like to view my finances through Jesus? Jesus cares about my sins, not my money. So, and then we even look at it as, well, Jesus lived back then. They didn't have all the finances and the work and all the distractions that we have today. So what does Jesus know about what I'm dealing with?
Yeah. But they did.
Yeah.
They did. I mean, them jokers wanted chariots.
Yep.
And they had houses to buy, and they had groceries to buy, and they had interest that they had to pay. Interestingly enough, all those things were in place. which is so crazy to think about. But you're right though. I remember when I was in seminary, and I think I probably told you this story, but we were witnessing in South Dallas, and which was a very drug-ridden area, and we were in this lady's apartment in government housing, and I remember saying to her, because I had this Jesus is the answer mentality, right? But it was just what I was taught to say,
right?
And I believed it, but I didn't know what it meant.
Yeah. And
so began talking to her, and she said, "Listen, don't talk to me about heaven and hell. I don't want to hear that. I got two sons that are 12 and 8, and they're being pulled to be drug dealers and run drugs. So if you can tell me how to keep those kids off the street, I'll listen to you." And I was like, Jesus is the answer. She's like, "Yeah, I don't want to hear that.
Yeah.
You just tell me how to keep my kids off the street. I'll be more than glad to listen to you."
Wow.
So I remember having to go home and talk to Julie and say, "Look, like I don't know. Is Jesus the answer to that? I mean, what am I going to do? Lead her through a sinner's prayer? Then what?" Then she looks at me and she goes, "Okay, now what?" And I remember a lady coming down when we were in our first pastorate in Dahlonega, Georgia, and we were still in seminary, and a lady came down and struggled with depression. And I remember praying with her, and she looked at me and said, "So what, that's it? Like that fixes me?" And I thought, well, yeah, because Jesus is the answer. What's that mean? You know what I mean? So I completely get that. And I remember wrestling through and struggling with that. But it really is this broadening this perspective of, we don't do a great job of explaining what that means. We just say it because
we like the zingers.
Man, I do like zingers. I'd like a zinger right now. Where's our box of zingers? And we like those zingers and those cliches. But then, I would just, I probably wouldn't like this, but it would be cool for somebody one Sunday in church to go, "So what does that even mean?"
Yeah.
Just yell it out, Like, man, great question.
Yeah.
Because it does mean, when I'm looking at finances and parenting and marriage or any of those things, like I've got to settle the satisfaction issue before any of that makes sense. Because my flesh will always look to those areas to find satisfaction. Like even in our parenting, we want to find approval in our parenting.
Yep.
That we did the right thing. We led them correctly. We had them in the right places. And we're going to validate that by the choices they make.
Yep.
Right? And then what happens when that doesn't work out correctly? Right? And then and then we get in that situation where we're like, "Wait a minute, man, I'm not feeling good about this area of my life because you didn't make good choices. So I need you to validate. So check this out. I need my kids to validate me." Like, what? Wow, where'd that, how's that ever make sense?
Yep.
But that's what we do until we understand and realize, like I was sharing with you guys earlier, as I was praying through my kids, younger days, whatever, making choices, whatever. And I just remember God saying to me, "When did this ever become, why do you think it's about you? Like, this isn't about you. Like, you need to just get out of the way. She's mine. He's mine. Like, I got them. I gave you the role of steward, not owner."
Yeah.
And so when you become owner, then it can be about you, but that's not you.
Yeah.
You're the steward. I'm giving, and I need you to look at this thing. If you don't look at this thing correctly, it's going to drive you crazy.
Yep.
But if you look at this in that I'm the owner, you're the steward, and I'm telling you how to steward my children. I'll take care of, I got this. Well, that just completely changed everything, how I viewed all of that. I was really able to kind of sit back and relax and go, you know what? This isn't about me. Because I was always afraid, like with my kids, man, every choice they made is a reflection on me as a pastor. And listen, I really believe that now we should manage our households well. Like, I get all that, but I think that even that means you got to view that correctly, right? Because you cannot control the choices people make.
Yep.
And if you try to control them, then you become the catalyst that creates rebellion.
Yeah.
So, but you got to realize, hey, listen, they may make choices you don't like. Okay, then what's your job now as a steward? Man, you got to go in and manage that situation correctly.
Yeah.
So where does the balance lie then? If we are to bring sinners into the circle, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Or put our believers, our children, into the sinner circle.
Yeah.
What's the balance between protecting and exposure?
Yeah, well, such a great question, because when and I'll tell you a personal experience of that. I was in one church, and I was actually talking about, in one of the services, we got these guys to start coming and playing RA basketball with us, and it was awesome. And these guys were like they lived in some government housing that was around this particular church that I was in, and great church, great people. So nothing about that. But it was just culturally, it was like a country club church who the neighborhood had kind of it wasn't far from the church where you kind of had these housing type things. Well, these guys who happened to be black were coming to our church, which we, at the time, I don't think we had any black people in our church. So they were playing RA basketball with us. Well, to play RA basketball on your team, like that got to come to your church like once a month or something like that. Well, they were coming to student ministry stuff. And that was already kind of shaking up the pot. Well, then they start coming to church. Well, then they start getting saved. Then they, we're baptizing them, and they're in church, and they're asking questions, and they're like, it was amazing. And I'll never forget having a meeting. And they said, well, we got to have a meeting with parents and deacons. Okay, well, I don't understand this, but okay. And you got to understand, like I was young, man. So you can imagine, I was like, all right, bring it on. I was fired up. And their biggest concern was, like, what are we going to do if these guys start asking our daughters out? and I'll never.
That's a big deal then.
And I'll never forget sitting there with this group, because we still have great relationships with some of these folks, and just been great friends for years and years and years. So super, but they weren't necessarily. Anyway, and I just remember saying, I don't know, you tell me. So what's the issue? What's the deal? I said, now, if we're talking about, and I don't know how I knew how to say this, because I was young, but I remember saying, if this is a scriptural issue, then we can have a conversation. But if this is a cultural issue, I'm not saying it's not valid for you, but that doesn't belong in church. So let's decide what conversation we're having, and let's have that conversation. Because I get both of them. I get both of the conversations. But let's not try to make one something that it's not. So if we're talking about interracial dating, let's not make that a scriptural issue. If it's a cultural issue, valid to have those conversations. But that does not belong in this church. So let's have those conversations. Now, here's what they were afraid of. Man, and it doesn't matter what the issue is. If I can keep all those people away from my kids, then my kids won't be tempted or exposed, or I'm keeping them safe. And Jesus addressed that in the Sermon on the Mount. He sarcastically said, well, if your right eye causes you to sin, pluck it out. Then you're going to sin with your left eye.
Yep.
If your left eye causes you, you can do all you want, and you're still going to sin.
Yeah. Because
it's in your mind and it's in your heart. And so to your question, Patty. Okay, so and that was one of many stories where anytime you see a student ministry, anytime you see a church, man, willing to start really reaching out. Now, let me say this, because I think this story addressed this a little bit. When we think about bringing sinners into the circle, for some reason we want to go 0 to 10 and go find the worst of the worst. And somehow get them, and I was kind of surprised when I started searching that word sinners, and I thought, I've always thought that meant prostitutes and vagrants and murderers and all of that, and it actually was very clear. It said this word does not mean irreligious or immoral. These are just people who were indifferent. They just didn't follow the law. They were just sinners. And I thought, you know what he's saying? These were just normal people, but everybody's a sinner. He was just saying tax collectors and sinners. Well, he was just identifying the tax collectors because Matthew was a tax collector. He was just saying sinners because Everybody else are just sinners. You know, they don't really have a category. They're just
kind of
sinners.
creates this line of like you've got everything past this, like sinners,
Yes.
law, abiding the law on this side, everyone on this side of the law. So you've got a spectrum of that, but it's everyone past.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
It's just everybody else.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I think that one of the things that we're so afraid to do, and now here's what we do. We tell ourselves, we have our kids in church, we have them in Sunday school, we prepare them well, but we never want them to take the test.
Wow.
Right?
That's true.
So that's
Pretty
like
true.
that's like coaching a wrestling team, and all you do is practice.
Yeah.
And now I'm gonna tell you this: I've had kids on a wrestling team who were unbelievable in practice, and they were terrible in a match. Like that meant they would. I mean, I had one kid. His name was Austin Long, and I'll say his name because I love Austin. I coached him years ago. But I'm gonna tell you something, man. Austin Long was a kid that wrestled for me at DCA, and he won matches, but he was great in the room. He was smart. He was probably one of the best technicians, like to pick up on a move and do it exactly right and all of that. But man, he would get in a match, and it would just, I don't know. He just, you know, it took him a while to understand how to transfer what he did in the wrestling room to an actual mat. Now, because he was great in the room, but he had a confidence in that room. He wasn't afraid to do what he had learned, and he did. He was great. But when he got on the mat, he froze up. It was just different. So he lost. Then he started to win, and I think that's where we do that with our kids a lot.
Yeah.
We train them, and then guess what? They never get in a match until they get to college.
Wow.
They never take a test. You know, however you want to look at that. They never get tested until they get to college.
Yeah.
And then what do? They freeze up, lock up, or they fail. And we wonder why. And we go, how could you have made that decision? How could you have done that? I sound like Jerry Seinfeld a little bit there, didn't I?
A little bit.
Yeah, a little bit. Not really. But, and we, you know, it surprises us. We've never been there with them to coach them through that.
Right.
Like, wouldn't it have been awesome? Like I think about with Austin, man, he would go in there and we'd look at a match and we'd talk about it. And I would go, man, honestly, it's not you not knowing the right things. It's you knowing how to apply it. Mm-hmm. Like, that's all it is.
Yeah.
Like you know it, dude, because I see you over here. So do it over here. Mm-hmm. So it took a little bit, and then he started being a winner. Mm. The sad thing about it is we're not there to coach our kids. Mm-hmm. So we should be coaching our kids in the years that we have them. Because when we send them off, somebody else is going to coach them.
Mm.
It's true.
Man.
So let's go back to the 4 things we talk about in parenting. Caretaker, cop, coach, consultant. Mm-hmm. We should be coaching our kids in their teenage years. And we're still playing the cop in their teenage years. Mm-hmm. And then we send them off without being coached. And now we're coaching our kids as they're out there away from our home. Listen, you start coaching young adults, they all of a sudden feel like they've got the right to not listen to the coach. Mm-hmm. That's when it gets hard.
Yeah.
And, you know, and I even have to remind Julie, you know, our kids are adults now. So we're consulting, we're not coaching. Because even when we start coaching our kids at their age, it's amazing just to watch how they respond. Mm-hmm. Like they'll bow up if we try to coach them. As much as they love us and as close as we are and as real as we've tried to be, they'll still blow up when we try to coach them. But Julie will always tell me, and that's not a negative thing. I'm not being negative to my kids, but Julie told me last night, hey, send a text out to the kids and make sure they know to leave their water on and leave their doors open. So I said, okay. So I did. Not one response. Because you know what I feel like they say to themselves sometimes? Don't they? Do they not think we know that?
You know I live by myself, right? Literally,
Yeah.
I'm saying that's the response.
Yeah.
Because my parents did the same thing last week, and I was like, I know, I live,
But
it's
so
the
you get it.
same,
Like,
yeah,
like
100%.
everything I'm saying, you understand.
Like my dad's listening to this laughing right now because
Yeah.
he's like, that's 100% accurate.
Because, we still want to coach.
Yeah.
And well, you could kind of slide that into consulting maybe, but consulting is more like you asking me a question and then
Right.
me giving you a couple of options.
Yep.
Coaching is more, I'm just going to tell you what to do. Right. So anyway, I think, man, that's a great question you asked, Patty, because we've had prior conversations, of us all in different environments trying to make sure that our kids, I mean, take the whole idea of a parent taking their kids out of a public school and putting them in a private school because they don't want their kids exposed to certain things.
Yeah.
Well, let me bust that bubble for you. A private school is just a microcosm of a public school. So while they may not see as much on a volume level, they will see everything on I don't know what's the right word, exposure level, right? So they may not see a number of kids doing drugs, but they're going to see kids doing drugs. They may not see a number of kids that are out partying on the weekends, but they're going to see kids. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So we kind of feel like environmentally we can control that. No, you can't. So then maybe parents will say, well, then we're going to take them from private school and we're going to become homeschool. You know what's interesting? Because I know you homeschooled. It's interesting to me how the homeschooling landscape has changed in the last 15 years. Yeah. Right? Because you even mentioned that before we started, you mentioned that a little bit.
When we first started, again, if you would have told me way back in the day that would be our path, I would have laughed, because I'm not an overtly patient person, and it takes a lot of patience to be able to do that. But, obviously we began that process because of Nathan's health. He could not have gone to public school. He would have missed 53 days of kindergarten.
Wow.
If that tells you anything. But just because we did that, he was able to get everything done,
right,
on time. So, but the Lord changed my heart and softened my heart, because that was what we had to do as a family.
Yeah.
And so it became more of a calling, and he gave me a peace about it. And so that was kind of what I was surrounded with those first probably 5 to 8 years of homeschooling. Again, we did all the way through. But then it became, again, well, I don't want my kid, this is going on in this school.
Right.
We're doing this, we're doing that. Where I was kind of in that, I don't want to say weird phase or whatever, but I remember when dual enrollment became a big thing. And one of the local private universities reached out to our homeschool tutorial and said, hey, do your juniors and seniors want to participate in this? We're going to host this meeting. And so as a representative of our homeschool tutorial, I'm sitting around the table with these professors, administrators from this university. And one of the moms from another tutorial just really ate them alive over some of the content that was going to be taught in one of the English classes. And they kind of did like a poll around the room. So what are your thoughts? And I'm like, my kids are still at home, so bring it on. Yeah. Because these are conversations I want to have.
Right.
If they're going to be exposed to what you've classified as junk.
Right.
I want it done in my home while I can still have those coaching moments.
Yeah, exactly. That's right.
But then, I'm looking back, did I hold on too tight? Did I coach too strongly? We were talking about.
Did you cop instead of coach?
Right.
Right. Yeah.
So.
That's hard. I mean,
yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, we're going to tell Cameron how to do it, right?
We are.
Help me.
No, I mean, I think that's hard. I think people have always asked me, like, what do you think about those different educational options? Because it's interesting how people are so adamant about, like, you got to be public school people, like you got to be homeschool people. I've had believers. I've been on panel discussions where I had certain individuals. I'm not going to name names because you'll make fun of me, but certain very popular people be very adamant about. Man, I'll never forget one time, and this one guy, very popular speaker guy, and he was like, he literally said, if you're a Christian and send your kids to public school, then basically you're not a Christian. And then there was another guy who was a very, very well-known guy that was like, he went to public school. He sent his kids to public school. So these guys were just going at it, and I'm thinking, really the way I look at it is, man, they're all options because you're responsible for your kids. Yep. You're responsible to steward your kids, and whatever environment you need to accomplish the task of educating your children, then you choose that option. Man, if it's public school and you're good and you feel comfortable with that, praise God.
Yeah.
But if it's not, you need to go private, then because your kid needs that, praise God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if they need to homeschool and because your kids need that, then that's awesome too. They're all great options. Like not one is any better than the other.
Right.
And now, do they all have implications? Sure they do. But that's where we've got to know our kids, know ourselves, and kind of what our role is, and what are we trying to accomplish?
Yeah.
And then just pick the right option. I mean, it's like, which bank do you bank at? Pick the right option.
Exactly.
Our kids' education is our responsibility. So who are we going to partner with in that process to help them with that?
Yeah.
Exactly.
And so, but even back to the coaching thing with our kids, I'm not at all saying, please don't hear me saying, hey, let's put our kids in really hairy situations so we can see them fail, then we can coach them. I don't think it's that at all. My mother had this mentality that, because my brother and I did crazy things when we were teenagers, we weren't believers and really didn't have that direction in our life. So my mom was like, now, your kids are going to go through that. I'm like, no, they're not. And I said, they might, but they don't have to. She's like, oh, yeah, they do. Every kid will go through that. Like in my mom's mentality, just get ready. They're going to do it. And I'm like, Mom, I can't buy that. Just because Danny and I did that, and that doesn't mean my kids are going to do that or all kids are going to do that. I don't think that's the case. But we don't need to be so blinded that not to think that our kids won't do some things that we don't agree with.
Yeah.
But when they do, the most important thing is not what they did; it's our response and how we coach them through that. Like that's what we got to remember. I don't know how this turned into a parenting podcast, but anyway. But I'll tell you this. So as the parent, let me give a couple tips. Number one, you got to remember it's not about you. Now that may not sound like that's difficult, but that is very difficult in that moment because you will question everything you've done in your kid's life. And what you didn't do right, and why didn't all these things work, and why, blah, blah, whatever. You'll go through that list, right? Secondly, saying nothing is better than saying the wrong thing. Okay? Because there have been times where I said the wrong thing. Because I'm telling you something, when you say the wrong thing, you cannot take it back. Words are like bullets. You can't put them back in the gun. So saying nothing is better than saying the wrong thing. Okay? And number 3, coach them to victory. Don't try to punish the mistake. Okay? Because if you can't see through this, you'll get stuck in it. You hear me? You hear what I'm saying? So you got to see through it. And because if you can't see through it, I'm just telling you, you'll waller in it. And when you waller in it, everybody wallers in it.
Yeah.
So and I can tell you this, the person, the child, whatever it is, that has made a decision that they're dealing with some consequences, they want out of that as bad as anybody. And they're looking to you to help them. So you may not know that or feel that at that moment, but I'm telling you, if you wallow in it because you can't see through it, you're not helping them at all. So you got to see through it, right? And those are all hard things.
Yeah,
those are all hard things. But I think again, so let's go all the way back to the question of we got to see all these things through Jesus.
Yeah.
Okay, so if I can't see my parenting through Jesus, I've got a very limited view of my parenting. Because I'm looking at it like, man, this is going to be kind of what makes me who I am and how people view me. And then my kid, so when all that gets wrapped up,
or even if it's about the kids, it's about making them successful.
Yes, successful.
Or be better,
I want people to look at them a certain way. Like when that is it, man, you're just fighting a battle in the flesh, and you're borrowing Jesus stuff to help you get through it. Instead of looking at this through the lens of Christ from an eternal perspective and going, okay, so man, they're just sinners saved by grace.
Yeah.
And you know what? This is just a part of a broken world, and we're going to help them walk through this, and we're going to help them see what the Word says about it and what Jesus says about it, and we're going to let them feel healing and direction and purpose and a way out from Him, not from us. I don't need to be the hero. I need Jesus to be the hero in that.
Yeah.
Right? Because when He is, and when I'm not there, they got somebody to run to.
100%. Yeah. Yeah, so what my mind's just been going this whole time. I was gonna at the beginning, or probably 20 minutes ago, make the just kidding.
Are you saying that? Man,
no, it was great.
No.
Wow.
Man, it was so good.
Wow, you busted me, man.
No, it was great.
What a zinger, dude. Nice 20-minute answer, Pastor.
I was gonna make a snarky
you just did.
comment.
Oh, you just did.
You're going to come in next week and there'll be a countdown clock.
Yes, 100%.
I'm gonna hit it every time you start. I start a question.
Where's the buzzer? Too long. Too long.
No, just kidding. But like how can Jesus? We talk about seeing everything through Jesus. Okay,
Yeah.
Well, Jesus wasn't a parent, right? Jesus wasn't married,
Right.
so how can I look at Jesus to fix or to help or see my marriage through that lens? How can I look at parenting through that lens?
Yeah.
But I think as I'm kind of thinking through it through this conversation, what Jesus did tell us is to go and make disciples. We talk so much about our kids being the primary disciplers of our kids. So part of us as parents making disciples is through our kids, okay, to marriage. Jesus is the head of the church. Jesus in the church is the ultimate picture of marriage. So like he relates to us on every level, but from the discipleship level, like we were talking about, as far as, I loved what you said of like, it's like we train or study for the test and then never actually take the test.
Right.
I think that applies to our parenting a lot of times, but also that applies to us as just disciple makers in general.
Yes.
When we're talking
Yes.
about being in the center circles or having them in our circle, whatever.
Yep.
I think so often we as the church, like that just describes our lives.
Yeah.
Like Paul says, talking about running a race, he trains for the race. So like only one runner wins the prize.
Yeah.
So he is training to win the prize. What if you train all this time for a marathon and never actually run the marathon?
Right.
Like what are we doing? But
yeah.
I think so often in church, like we want to get all the information and know and talk and figure it out and learn it, but we're never actually in a situation to go and make disciples,
Right.
to share our faith, to tell people in a lost, dying, broken world that there's an answer to the end.
And you know why? Because we don't know any lost people. Dude, we don't know any lost people. I mean, we don't have any sinners, quote unquote, in our congregations because we're not inviting them. We're not bringing them.
Yep.
That's it.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, to answer your question, like you said, Jesus wasn't a parent, so how did he speak to parenting, things like that? We'll give you the Kentucky answer. He was God. Hello. Right? But you kind of answered your own question.
Right, I did.
Because Jesus wasn't married, and you go, well, then how can he speak into my marriage? Well, he is the groom of the bride.
He's the picture of it.
He's the picture of it. And so basically he gave us, he showed us what to do in our marriages based on what he has done for his church.
Yep.
So principles are the same.
Yeah.
It's all there. Our marriages are that's why I say all the time, our marriages are to reflect Jesus' love for the church.
Yep.
And if they're not, then we're missing the point of our marriages.
Yep.
So it is harder. It is harder to look at all of this through the lens of Christ because here's the problem. Let's go back to the text I got. How do you view Jesus? Well, I view Jesus as, judgment house, hellfire and brimstone. I've done all these things wrong and I'm going to hell. And if I don't give my life to Jesus, I'm going to go to hell. So that's how I view him. Well, when it comes to my marriage and my family and my parenting and all those types of things, I don't need him until I need to make sure my kids don't go to hell.
Right.
And I don't need him until those types of things. So how I'm introduced to him, how I met him, is how I will view him.
Yep.
And we've got to get people to view him correctly.
Yep.
And that's the beauty of this series that I'm seeing already, is it really is, who do you say that I am? I don't know how. It's just Holy Spirit inspired that title came up for this, because I wasn't seeing this when we said, hey, what about titling it this? I think that was your idea, Patty. I was like, yeah, that sounds great. I love it. But it's really what is happening already. You know, we have to see him for who he is.
Which is what Matthew did.
That's exactly right.
Right? You think about all the money and the position that he held. It wasn't enough to satisfy until he met someone so different.
Yeah.
And just immediately gave it up and followed.
I mean, think about this. How unsatisfied in life do you have to be willing to betray your own people just to go find something you think you're going to find?
Yeah.
So I'll sit in a booth and be hated by Gentiles. Matthew was hated by everybody. The Jews hated him because he was a betrayer. The Gentiles hated him because he stole from them. The Romans hated him because he was he was just being used by them. Like literally, who liked Matthew?
A disgrace to his own family too.
A disgrace to his own family.
So alone. And for Jesus to come into his circle.
Yeah.
It's huge.
Yeah.
That's the discipleship
And for
model.
Jesus to invite him into his circle.
Yeah.
Like here's, and you can imagine, now I think it's funny how The Chosen has portrayed Matthew, has chosen to portray Matthew. But what I do think is probably accurate is Peter's resentment toward Matthew. Because, you really do get the sense of, here's a Jew who hates another Jew because, man, you work for the people who were oppressed by. Even though the Jews were free to do what they did, they were under Roman rule. So they still felt that oppression. Now you work for them. You work for the enemy. So you can imagine. And then Jesus invites him into his circle. And then Matthew has a party and invites all of his buddies because he wants them to know Jesus. Why did he do that? Because how he met him is how he viewed him.
Yep.
And this guy loved me. He invited me in. Yep. Maybe he'll invite you in.
Yeah, I think that's huge. So how do we, because I think that's so true, that how we met Jesus is how we so often view him. So how do we flip that? And how do we accurately view Jesus, regardless of how we met him, regardless of what we think of him now or what our distorted view may be? Because I think there's, on one side, you've got the judgment house, heaven's gates, hell's flames, hellfire and brimstone side of things where he's just there to judge. You've got the other side with kind of the seeker friendly kind of movement of just, how can Jesus help my life?
Yeah, he's the motivational speaker guy.
Yeah, make my life better. So then I'm going to just go to him when I need help with something.
Right.
Regardless of what our skewed view of Jesus is, how do we learn to accurately view him and see our lives through an accurate view of him?
And I'm just saying this because not because I figured something out or I'm a genius or anything, but I think I'm just watching this being revealed. Like I'm watching this kind of happen in real time. I think it comes down to, like, can we open up our minds? And maybe I just need to do a better job of talking about this since this is all kind of coming up. Like, can you just open your mind and just clear the whiteboard and say, let your view of Jesus be determined by what is revealed in Scripture? Now, I think the problem is that, like that story, for example, the four guys and, the paralytic. Any other time you've heard that message, now watch this, dude. Now be honest, but watch this. Any other time you've heard that message preached and you walked away, what did you remember the most?
That I got to bring my friends. It's all about the friend side of it. Yeah.
There you go. That's the problem. Because that story is not about those four guys. I think when we die and get to heaven and we run up and we go, dude, you're the four guys who took the paralytic to Jesus.
Yeah.
And they're like, so let me take you to Jesus. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But what we do is that we preach that and we teach that in such a way that it doesn't point to Jesus.
Yeah.
Jesus just happened to be the guy that was there who healed him.
Yeah.
And you know what we don't focus on? His sins were forgiven.
Yeah.
So how many times have I been guilty in the past and others of preaching those types of messages to appeal to people? And the way we're going to appeal to people is we're going to give them something that's clever and cute, and we talk more about the four guys and tearing a hole in the roof than we do the fact that Jesus has the authority to forgive sin.
That's so, like you think about, we tell a story about Jesus, and the person that we focus on in the story that Jesus is in is not Jesus.
It's not yes.
Like he's a side character of the
Yes.
story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it gets back to what others have said in the past.
Yeah.
Is Jesus the supporting actor,
Right.
or is he the main character?
Right.
So, yeah, you can get it like from a drama perspective. I mean,
Yep.
there's a main character, and then everybody else is just supporting that character. And we've put Jesus over here in the support role instead of being in the main role. And so, therefore, because we view Jesus as our way to get out of hell and into heaven, the problem with that view is the only time you need him is when you get saved and when you die. Or you need to make sure your kids know that. So you will pressure. So when your kids get old enough, you'll get real adamant about making sure they get baptized because they got to know the Jesus you know. And here's the only Jesus you know. You know the Jesus that will send you to hell if you die unless you
Say the prayer and get to,
That's right. So that's what we do.
say the prayer, walk the aisle,
Yeah.
go into the water.
It's like my mother looked at me when I was 17 and said, "Don't you think you should get baptized?" And I'm like, "What? We have not been to. I hadn't been to church since I was 7 with my grandparents at Vacation Bible School."
Yeah.
You're asking, what does that even mean? She's like, you should, because there was a time in her life where she went to a fire and brimstone church, and she got baptized as a young person, and so without any prior experience, I needed to do that too.
Yeah.
Because it's the right thing to do. And you know what? Praise God for my mom, who at least thought that was something I needed to do, because
Right.
that's all she knew.
Yeah.
That was her view of Jesus. And so that's, we have a lot of people like that. So we have to change the people's view. And the only way to do it, man, because I can't do that.
That's right.
We can't do that. Our skits and our songs and our communicate, like all that we do, that we're passionate about doing, we don't have the ability to do that.
Yep.
But the Holy Spirit does. So it takes, maybe it's one person at a time
Mm-hmm.
that can text and say, "Man, that was a big deal." It was really the intro,
Yep.
And I'm thinking, dude, that was 10 minutes of a 40-minute sermon. But you know what? That's how you do it, because it starts with me realizing, wow, maybe that is true. Maybe if I don't view Jesus correctly, then I'm not letting him impact these other areas of my life.
Mm.
And it's not that he wants to be the helper, again, that support role.
Mm-hmm.
He wants to be the king. He wants to be the owner of that,
Yep.
not the supporter.
Yep. Absolutely. Well, I love the way this passage, it's kind of two sections, but verse 17 kind of wraps up this section and wrapped up the message. When Jesus heard it, he said to them, "Those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick.
Yeah.
I came not for the righteous, not to call the righteous, but sinners." I think all this for us kind of sets our eyes where it should be. It really is hard to completely clear our minds of what we know and just take Scripture for what it is. There's the song we were talking about today, "Take You at Your Word."
Yeah.
Because we've heard the word preached through these lenses at times and have sat under preaching in a different context, whatever it may be. But I think that's huge.
You know what would be hard though? If Jesus were here right now, he wouldn't spend any time with us.
Mm. Yeah.
That would be hard for us.
Yep.
Because we'd be like, dude, what? Like, isn't it about us? And he would be like, "No, man, we gotta go get sinners.
Yeah.
We got a job. Like the day for us to all hang out."
Oh yeah, we got to get sinners so we can get more people here on Sunday, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's right. Yeah. Geez, we got a building program going on. Where we're gonna we got to go get sinners.
Yeah.
Like I didn't come back down here to give you guys the attaboy. Like, our day's coming. Man, there's going to be a day I got set aside for you guys. It's going to be awesome. And we're going to hang out at the banquet table. And I've got to turn, like, it's all good. But that's not where we are right now. Like, we're in the game right now.
Yep.
And I need you guys to be in the game. And the game is we got to go after sinners. Like, quit sitting around and calling righteous. It's like every Sunday. Think about this, man. Every Sunday, all we do is meet and give everybody attaboys. No, I'm not saying that's what we do, but you know, you can get a feeling like if we're just kind of slapping high fives to each other on Sunday mornings, what are we doing?
Yeah.
You know? Well, it takes. So how does a church do that? How does a church bring sinners into the circle? Well, a church is an organization. That's not an organizational command. It's not a corporate command. It's an individual command. Like, until we start putting sinners in our circles, they'll never be in the church.
Yeah.
So it's really us. It's really us being willing to develop relationships with people who are far from God, and just loving them and just being their friend and saying, hey, man, would you like to come to church with me on Sunday? Yeah, man, I'll go with you. And they're going to go because they trust you.
Yeah.
They don't trust the church. They don't trust God, but they trust you.
Yeah.
Dude, what about how good was it yesterday that my man comes down to join at 8:30 service after I preach, and he comes up and says, well, man, I just want you to know I'm here because Ronnie Rye invited me. And I'm like, did y'all set this up? I mean, did you know I was going to preach this?
Right.
You know, here you got 4 guys who bring a paralytic to Jesus.
Yeah.
And then some guy comes down to join the church, and he says, I'm here because somebody invited me.
Yeah.
And Ronnie come up later and said, you know, that's my cousin. And I'm like, that's awesome, man.
Yeah.
I said, isn't it funny how that's just what we talked about?
Yeah.
But like, that's it, man. That's it. Like, here's a guy who needed to be involved in the body.
Yeah.
And, you know, it was a cousin, but I mean, a friend just invited him.
Yeah.
Right. So that's what it takes. Like, it's not rocket science,
Yeah.
but we make it a project, and we make it like, okay, let's go out and let's see how many sinners we can find. Now let's be friends with sinners. Ooh, how many sinners are you friends of now? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And we kind of make it that way instead of just realizing, dude, just live life and just open your doors, fellowship with your neighbors, meet people, develop relationships.
Yeah.
And man, you know, you'll get into that conversation and take them to Jesus. And bringing them to church is a great opportunity. I remember I had a seminary professor that used to tell us, he said, the Bible is a go and tell gospel, not a come and hear gospel. And I don't disagree with that. The reality is that go and make disciples is what the command was. But what he's saying is, hey, listen, let's not limit it to just inviting people to church.
That's right.
Which I agree with that, right? It's both and, not either or. So the one of the great tools we have to bring people to Jesus is inviting them to church. It really is.
Yeah.
And it's just a great opportunity for us to take advantage of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's good stuff, man. It was a good message, and I think this has been a good conversation because even the parenting side is so applicable from a parenting standpoint, but it also, like I said, it applies to our discipleship as well.
It does.
It applies to our role as believers, and so it's been really good stuff.
Awesome.
So, good deal.
Patty, got anything else?
Should I have something else?
No, I'm waiting. Sooner or later, you're going to figure out just the Robin Gibb response. No. No.
We do have our marriage workshop coming up on Saturday.
We do.
I think the registration deadline was yesterday, but
Yeah.
you never know.
Yeah.
And then also the women's ministry event
Yep.
is coming up February 8th.
Yep.
Yeah. We should have our bathroom trailers operable this Sunday.
Yeah.
Excited about that. This Sunday, check this out, is the last Sunday the kids will be in the kids building.
Wow.
It's exciting.
It is, but it seems like it's happening fast.
It is.
So this Sunday, last Sunday, February 2nd, we'll have all kids in the Owens building on the first floor, adults on the second floor. And the transition continues.
There you go.
It doesn't begin, it continues.
That's right.
Rapidly.
So it's good though. People are excited, and our people are being great about that. So
yeah, exciting stuff. Yep. Sounds good. Well, thank you all for listening. We'll see you next week.
Next week.